Jeremiah 29:11 is not about your breakthrough. It's about your endurance. So let's get into it. Most people quote Jeremiah 29:11 when they're believing God to get them out of something. Out of stress, out of lack, out of waiting, out of the season that doesn't look like the promise. But what if I told you Jeremiah 29:11 was never spoken to people who were being delivered? It was actually spoken to people who were being told to stay. Stay in Babylon, stay in exile, stay in chains, stay in a place that didn't look like God's goodness. Jeremiah 29:11 is not just a verse, it's a letter. A real letter written by the prophet Jeremiah, sent from Jerusalem to God's people who were carried away into Babylon. And God was so serious about this message that he sent it with two messengers. Two people had to protect it, and two people had to deliver it. Because even in captivity, God was still speaking. And in verse 4, God says something that gets me every single time. And it says, "This is what the Lord Almighty says to those I carried into exile." God didn't say Nebuchadnezzar took you. God said, "I carried you." Which means what felt like punishment was actually repositioning. Ooh. What felt like loss was actually alignment. You weren't abandoned. You were sent. Then God gives them instructions that sound crazy for slaves. He says, build houses, plant gardens, marry, have children, let your children get married and have kids. That's a long time, bro. In other words, stop living like this is temporary. Stop pitching tents where I'm building foundations. God was telling them, hey, you're going to be here longer than you think. And that's the hard part, because we don't like long seasons we didn't choose. But God was planning their grandchildren while they were still in chains. He wasn't just thinking about survival. He was thinking about legacy. Then he says something powerful. Increase in number, do not decrease. Why? Because exile does not cancel covenant. Babylon does not stop the blessing, and hard times do not erase God's plan. You can be in the wrong place and still be in the right process. God was preserving his people, protecting the bloodline, and multiplying the promise even in captivity. And then God gives them a warning: do not let the prophets and the diviners among you deceive you. In other words, don't let somebody lie to you because the truth hurts. And don't look for a word that shortens the process. Sometimes the most dangerous lie is the one that promises you escape instead of transformation. God wasn't in a rush to remove them. He was determined to restore them. And then after all of that, God finally says, after 70 years are complete, I'll bring you back. And then he says, for I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. So Jeremiah 29:11 isn't about quick blessing. It's about guaranteed restoration. Hope wasn't denied. It was scheduled. So if you're in a season that doesn't look like God's promise, if you're in a place that you didn't choose, if you're building in a land that feels foreign, don't panic. You might be standing in the very process that produces the promise that God already spoke over you. Because even here, God still knows the plans he has for you, and they are still good. Until next time, see you later.